Good morning and welcome to another exclusive session in the CH Tribe's Career Accelerator Sunday series. I'm Roshin from Clever Harvey, and I'll be hosting today's session on how to come up with startup ideas with our special guest speaker today, Partha Chakraborty. Every business began their journey as a startup. Many major companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon started in their founders' garages. But to even get to that point, you need a killer idea. So you might be thinking, there are already so many companies in the world and so many ideas. How am I going to come up with a unique idea? What problem should I solve? Where do I even start? In today's session, we're going to answer all of these questions and more. Partho is a senior investment manager at V Founder Circle with over 18 years of experience as a corporate citizen, venture capitalist, and entrepreneur. Mr. Chakraborty is a data-driven angel investor who has previously set China operations for a global sportswear company. He has worked with the largest Chinese conglomerate and was a part of the Kalari capital. He started his career as an English teacher in China and spent a decade there before moving back to India. Welcome, Partho. We're delighted to have you here.
Hey, thank you very much. Yes, I think Roshin has already covered everything. Just to add, I'm an investor by profession, but entrepreneur at heart. Although I'm doing investing as a full-time job, I treat it as a part-time job because most of the time I spend with founders, understanding their ideas, adding my own ideas to their business and help them out in the journey. So basically here I'll cover how you can come up with, startup ideas, then how to evaluate these startup ideas, how to validate them further, how to go to the customer and ask them the right questions so that you know that you are going in the right direction. So basically there's a saying that, ideas are useless, execution is key. So ideas are worth a dime a dozen. Everyone has a lot of ideas, but they're not worthy, which I believe is totally wrong. I believe that ideas are probably, I would say ideas is one of the most important criteria in building a business, because if you go with the wrong idea, then basically you'll spend a lot of time in the wrong direction. So far as the Indian startup ecosystem is concerned, and also globally, I think coming up with unique ideas is something which is lacking in this ecosystem. There are a lot of copycat ideas, and as a result, there are a lot of competition in the market. So everybody is trying to do something which has been, if it's done in the West, that's fine. But sometimes you see in India, there are a lot of competing companies doing the same thing and claiming it as unique. Right. So I think there is a lot of scope. I think there needs to be a lot of, I would say, skill development in, helping entrepreneurs coming up with, unique ideas and testing them in the market. And another problem is, if you look at the investor side, they do not usually fund unique ideas because they are themselves not very imaginative and creative, and they do not see how that idea can become a potential big business. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Kalari, we invested in this company called Dream 11, which is, if you know, it's now a unicorn company. But they actually reached out to 150 investors and no one funded them because at that time, no one had heard of this fantasy sports space. It was quite popular in the US and Europe, but in India, no one ever heard of it, and no one wanted to fund the team. Eventually, Kalari funded them, and now you know where they are. I'm sure everyone here is probably, I would say 80% of the people are probably using Dream 11 app. So I'll start with frameworks first. These are some of the frameworks which a lot of people use to come up with different ideas. I'll share a few of them here. So number one is basically solving a personal problem. So this is something which is advocated by even like if you've heard of Y Combinator and other investors as well, because you as a founder have faced a problem and you are the right person to solve it because you know what the problem is and you've probably tried to find a solution to that, right? And if you have that problem, there'll probably be others who have that problem as well, right? So solving your own itch is a good way of finding a startup idea, right? So I'll give you examples here. So for example, when Drew Houston, he had a problem of carrying these USB sticks, because the problem of carrying data on USB sticks is that the data can be corrupted. You can lose your stick, right? So and as a result of that, you can lose all your data. You can lose your photos, videos, right? So that's why he came up with this Dropbox where you can store all the data on the cloud. And when he started, it was way back, but that time there was very few players in the market. I think there was only Microsoft, right? But no one else who was doing this cloud-based data solutions. As a solution to the problem, he came up with Dropbox, and then after he reached out to customers, he saw that others have the same problem, and then Dropbox eventually became a big company. Second is a company called Airbnb. There, the founder had a personal problem. He was living in New York and he saw that, people who wanted to attend some of these conferences in New York couldn't find hotels at that time because it was overcrowded and it was expensive. So he basically rented out his own couch to strangers. And then he saw that as a business model. So as he started to do that one by one, eventually Paul Graham, who was his mentor and also that time the head of the YC Accelerator program, he advised him, you should do this one by one, and then eventually, you can scale this business. So this is number one, solving your own itch. The second way of thinking about an idea is, can you bring something, offline to online, right? So you've already seen a lot of edtech companies now. So basically, they're trying to bring, so especially after the COVID, these edtech companies are trying to bring the education that was happening in schools, colleges, and institutes online through different kind of courses, live online sessions. Right. So education is an example. Second is, financial services, let's say banking. So before you would have to you have to go to the bank, stand in the queue to avail all these services, whether, you want to deposit money, take out money. You can, transfer money through your mobile app, right? And you can check your balance, these kind of things, which you don't have to do. You don't have to go to the bank and, do. Third is, again, a classic example of online shopping, right? You don't have to go to the store. You can actually just, sit at home, buy whatever you want to. And there are a lot of companies which are also now helping with coming up with the right fit of clothing so that, you don't have to return your clothes. So this is basically how you can think of bringing something which is happening offline to online. So another example is, again, grocery, right? You can order groceries online. You don't have to go to the market, go to the different stores. You don't need to create a shopping list because, once you order groceries online, there is a shopping list that is already created, which you can reuse, again and again. Third is basically, this is like the copycat model. So this is basically bringing something which is popular in one country, right, to another country. So, for example, Flipkart was kind of based on the idea of Amazon, but in India that time there was no similar products like Amazon. So, Flipkart was one of the first, and that's how it kind of succeeded. Another example is Didi Chuxing in China. So they copied the Uber model, but because they were a local company and they understood the culture and problem of the local people well, so they eventually were able to beat Uber, at their own game, right? So here the idea is, so how you want to proceed here is you want to see, what are the successful startups in different countries, and you want to see if it's being done in India or not, and then you can do something in India. So number 4 is, again, this is something which Paul Graham of Y Combinator suggests, that you want to use your imagination. You want to see, like, you want to go to the future and you want to kind of imagine what will be there. So let's say that after 10 years, what do you think will be there, which is not there right now, right? So a popular concept today is flying cars. So a few startups are actually working on these flying cars, and we are expecting that maybe in the next 2 years, we'll probably have flying cars in the market. So you can, like, you can imagine, 10 years down the line, what are these different kind of products and services that people will require. So again, going back to the flying car example, right? A lot of companies are building flying cars, but now you can think of, who is going to provide with the support services, like who is going to, fly these cars, right? Who is going to repair these cars, right? So you can think of, doing something where, you can start these services right now. Maybe you can train, maybe you can have a marketplace of pilots, who would be ready to, drive these cars, or maybe you can have trained drivers, right, in the future on how to, fly these cars. So these are possible kind of services which you need to think of, what can happen in the future. And if you start right now, maybe after a few years, you'll probably be, at the right time, in the right place. So the fifth way of thinking about an idea is to simplify things, right? So if you file taxes, you'll know that, it's a long process. Usually you can hire a chartered accountant, you can do it yourself, but there are a lot of things you have to go through, a lot of forms you have to fill in. So there are companies like ClearTax, which basically helps you file your tax return, right? And they also provide a lot of other services as well, but you can file your tax return. It will take 10 minutes of time. So basically they're simplifying your life by helping you do something which is very, not only complicated, but which takes a lot of time to, complete it in 10 minutes or less. So you can think of, what is happening in the, offline world, which is very complicated, which takes a lot of time, right? So for example, college admissions, you have to stand in queues to get the forms. That was happening some time back, but now a lot of companies are trying to, automate the process using technology. So you can think on those lines. 6, to think about moonshots. So these are basically impossible ideas which can really change the world, but this will take a lot of time and resources to eventually build. Classic example is SpaceX, right? I think it took over 10, 15 years to actually launch the first rocket into space. So these are called moonshots because these are almost impossible to do. But on the bright side, if you're able to achieve these, then it can not only benefit you personally as an entrepreneur, getting fame, money, but it can help the world. 7 is something called integration. Basically, you are using different aspects of different businesses and then you are combining them with each other. So for example, Slack is basically you're taking social networking from apps like Facebook or WhatsApp, and then you're combining it in the corporate world, or I would say the business world. So there are a lot of examples, right? For example, if you combine an app like TikTok, right? Instead of taking long form videos of YouTube, you're taking short form videos and you are delivering it to a younger community of people, right? So basically integration is where you are combining, different ideas from different startups or apps, and then you're trying to build something new. Another example I can give is, so for example, you can use features. For example, if you look at apps like Tinder, where they have a swipe function. So now what a lot of these job-based apps are doing is they're using the similar feature where you can, scroll through jobs through a left or right swipe. And even a lot of apps with like news sites and, short form content, they're using the same kind of feature as well. So these are some of the examples. Then the next one is something called subtraction. Here you are trying to kind of take out different services from a service provider who is providing a lot of services, and you're focusing on one individual service. So for example, some time back, there was these, if you look at the newspaper, you'll see something called classifieds, where you have different jobs, you have matrimonials, you have different properties for rent or, sale. So now what some companies have done is they have taken out one of these services and they've focused on that entirely. So for example, Naukri.com, and there are a lot of job sites which are only focusing on the jobs part, right? Second is like 99 acres. There are companies like Makan and housing.com, so which are only focusing on the housing part. Then again, you have Shadi.com, Bharat Matrimony. These sites are basically only focusing on the matrimony part. Classifieds is something which will probably not be there going down in the future. So here you can look at what is being advertised, and then you can maybe take out a portion of that and start your own venture there. So for example, like if you see in the screen there, it says student loans, right? So maybe you can do a startup on student loans. So inversion is another way of thinking about startup ideas. So it's basically you are inverting an idea. So for example, when we think about, let's say, schools, or let's say going to work, right? Or even shopping, right? So the idea is basically we are going to the shop, we're going to the school, we're going to our workplace, right? But if you invert the idea, it's basically how do you bring that school or job to you instead of you going to them. When COVID happened, everybody was working from home or studying from home. So basically then what service providers did is bring whatever the content was to the user. So for example, for education, you can sit at home and learn on various topics, upgrade your skills. And if you're working for a company, they started work from home. They come up with different tools where you can use to collaborate with other people and basically get the job done from home without the need to go to office. And then there are also platforms now coming up where you can virtually interact with your colleagues, right? So work from home probably will be something that will stay, and many companies are kind of advocating that. Okay, so extension is basically when you look at a product which is being used in a particular, let's say for example, an app which is popular on the desktop, right? You can think of how you can bring that to a mobile device. So this is basically how you're extending a product to a different platform. So for example, maybe there is an app on the Apple Play Store, right? But there is no alternative in the Google Play Store. So maybe you can think of whether I can create a similar kind of app for the Google Play Store. Right? So this is basically you're extending an idea from one place to another place where it is non-existent. Point number 11 is thinking of an idea by thinking of value propositions. So when we think about value proposition, we're basically thinking that how does a business help the customer, right, or the user? Some value propositions are things like, does it help the user make money? Second value proposition could be, does it help the user save costs? Does it help save time? Does it help the person to social network with other people? Does the product help a person to stay healthy, right? So these are different kinds of value propositions. So you can think of a value proposition, and you can think of a target market, and then basically you can brainstorm on that, right? So for example, how do you save time? You can look at a target market, right? Like for example, maybe you can pick a small target market, like let's say doctors or nurses, right? And you can think of how do you help nurses or doctors save time. So this kind of helps you brainstorm and talk to your friends or other people to see what kind of ideas you can come up with based on the value proposition and the target market. We're going to talk about painkillers, vitamins, and candy. So painkillers are basically products where these are basically must-haves. You need it. So for example, if you're sick, you need to get an antibiotic, right, to cure yourself. Then you have products like vitamins. So vitamins are basically, they're a good to have product. You don't need them, but it can, if you take vitamins, you will stay healthy, right? So they are more of like a preventive way to make sure that you stay healthy and you don't catch any disease, or you don't fall ill. And then you have candy. So candy is basically something which is very addictive. You don't know what it is, but once you try it, you want to keep using it again and again. So I'll give you an example of these products. So now I'm going to give you an example of TikTok. Now here it's debatable, where whether a product is a painkiller. Some products could be a painkiller, could be a vitamin, could be a candy, depending on who the user is. So TikTok, for many people who regularly use it, is a painkiller because they use it regularly, frequently, every hour. But some, it's more like a vitamin. They would probably use it maybe once a day, maybe once a week. It's not something very essential, but it's something where they would probably use it to kill time. But then you can think of TikTok as candy as well, right? Before, when TikTok first came to the market, everybody was very skeptical, in that, how could TikTok be a very big, app? Because all it has is, people's like singing and dancing. And this is a question, I asked myself in 2016 that, what is the value proposition here? I don't really understand what's happening. Just people are dancing, showing off, and it's like short videos. So what's really going on? But then, eventually found out that, now TikTok is probably the most downloaded application in 2022 already. There are many versions of TikTok. There are Indian versions. There are different verticals of TikTok. Now people are coming up with, let's say, educational content. Some are coming up with, specific niches, like, maybe a particular topic, let's say career building, coming up in different languages. So for example, there's an app which is basically doing short form video in Hindi, talking about, things like, how to get a job, how to do interviews, how to different kind of troubleshooting with your PC or mobile. So again, when you think of an idea, you have to ask yourself, what am I building? Is it a painkiller? Is it a vitamin? Or is it a candy? The next model is very popular. This is again something which Y Combinator uses. It not only helps you explain what your business is in a very short form, but actually helps the other person understand what you're doing. So it's called an X for Y model. So a lot of people will say, we're building the Uber for education, or Shopify for some influencers, or Flipkart for drivers. You can think of anything. So X for Y is basically when you kind of plug in a business model, and then you can apply to different use cases. So I'm going to give you 3 examples here, right? So marketplace is probably one of the most common startup business models. So marketplace is where you have a two-sided community. You aggregate shops, and on the other hand, you aggregate buyers, right? So now there are different versions of marketplaces. There are B2B marketplaces where they aggregate different kinds of. It could be different industrial products. It could be business services, right? And then they find on the other side, they find businesses or freelancers who could use these services, right? So marketplace is one of the models which you can use to cater to your own ideas. So for example, you can have a marketplace for, let's say, home cooked food. Second is an example is called the Thrasher model. So Thrasher model is, so this is a new business model which has come up in the last 2 years. So Thrasher is a company. What they do is they buy top selling companies on Amazon. So they find the top selling products in a particular vertical. So let's say kitchenware. So they buy all these top selling product sellers, and then they make money out of that. So basically, buy out the company, and then they earn revenue from the sales, and then they use that money to buy out other companies and move to other verticals, right? So you can use a similar kind of model for a different use case. Like for example, you can think of how you can buy, let's say, different, let's say, web properties. Maybe you can buy websites. Maybe you can buy domain names, and then add some content to it, sell it off, see how you can make money out of it, right? Or maybe you can buy, let's say, a lot of content based companies, and then how you can sell it to, let's say, e-commerce companies who are looking for content, which can help them sell their products. So third is again something new. It's called fractional ownership. The simple version of fractional ownership is basically a stock market. So basically, when you are buying a share of a company, you are basically kind of owning a small portion of that company. So when a company wants to raise money, they will issue shares, and then people can buy, these shares, and that way the company can raise money. So now this model is being used by a lot of different kinds of companies, helping in investing in different kinds of assets. So for example, now there is something called fractional ownership of houses, where a group of 10 or 20 people can pool in their money to buy one house, right? So eventually you will be owning a part of the house, and also if the house is making money through, let's say, rentals, or let's say there's a gain in the price of the house in the future, then you will get a share of the profits, along with your other members who have also bought shares in. So then again, similarly, there are companies where these companies are buying very expensive paintings, right, which cost probably like up to $1 million. And what you can do is you can invest a small portion of money on these paintings, and then eventually, when the price of the painting appreciates, then if they sell it to another buyer, then you can make money there. Right, so these are examples of fractional ownership. A recent company I was talking to is very interesting. They're doing fractional ownership of cars. So instead of owning a luxury car like a BMW or maybe even a high-end car, you could actually team up with a group of, let's say, 10 people who are living in the same complex, and then you can invest maybe only 1/10 of the price of the car, but you all can enjoy the benefits. So the last one is something called white spaces. So basically here what we are doing is we are kind of mapping companies based on different characteristics or features, and then we are seeing that which area where there is no competing companies. This is a white space mapping for fashion. So here you will see on the, like for example, the horizontal axis you have quality, on the vertical axis you have price. So if you want to do low quality products, or you could say maybe for the young people, who have tight pockets, right? You are looking at, they're okay with the quality being low, but as long as the price is cheap, right? So here you have companies like Boohoo or Primark, right? But then there are if you want to do an average quality, an average price, then you have H&M. But then you have brands like Zara or Marks and Spencers, where the quality is higher and the price is higher as well. Now you'll see that if you see this chart here, you'll see that there is no company where the low quality is there and high price is there, because no one will buy a low quality product for a high price, right? So you have to see where you can map your idea where no one else is there. So the advantage here of starting in the white space is that you have a competitive advantage being the first mover. You have a lot of time to improve the product, talking to your customers, eventually building something at a level where when others will come in, they will face some kind of challenges because you already have captured some of that market, right? So these 14 basically are some of the frameworks I use to come up with ideas. There are plenty of others, and if we have time, I'll be happy to talk to you and discuss them as well. So now, once you have an idea, how do you evaluate if this idea is going to be worth it or not? Should I go on with the idea? Should I explore further? Right. So here are 14 questions again you can ask to see whether your idea makes sense or not. So number one is is it a popular problem? Is the problem or opportunity popular? Right. Like, do a lot of people have this problem? Right. So for example, it could either be a problem or it could be an opportunity. So problem is something you already know which people are facing. An opportunity is basically where you don't know if it's a problem or not, but you see that there's an opportunity. So for example, if you look at Web3 space, or let's say the NFT space, it's a big opportunity. So Can you think of an idea in that space, right? Which could have a lot of popularity. Number two is the market demand growing. So basically, you want to invest in an idea where the market is growing, right? Where there is potential in the future, where more and more people are coming on. So, for example, healthcare is a very big idea, and you can think of ideas there because it's a very growing market, and it will grow for a long time. Number three is the problem urgent? Do people need it right now? Because if they need it right now, then they'll probably be willing to pay for it right now as well. Is the problem frequent? Do I face this problem often? Because let's say if you're charging on a price per solution, right? So then the more frequently the problem the people have, the more they will pay for the solution. So is the problem mandatory? Is it something which has to be solved? So for example, I mentioned about clear tax. So filing your taxes is something which is compulsory. You have to do it, right? So these companies need to exist, right? So you have to think of the problem I'm trying to solve. Is it something which is mandatory? Is the problem expensive? So if you're solving an expensive problem, then you can also make a lot of money for the business. So if you have a cure to something, where something like, let's say, cancer, or let's say you're providing very luxury real estate, which is totally a different use case here. But these are expensive problems. So people will be willing to pay a lot of money for that. Now you have to think of how you can translate that money into a large market where it makes sense to do business. Because, for example, again, I go back to the luxury real estate thing. So selling luxury real estate would not be a startup business because it's not going to be scalable. We'll probably be selling one property at a time. So that will not be startup. But you can think of if you can maybe aggregate, luxury real estate properties and see, how you can get a group of people to buy. Will people pay? That's the big question, and that's a big reason also why startups fail, because they build companies and eventually they're not able to generate any money, and as a result they run out of money and then they have to shut down. So you have to think of something where people will pay for it. It will not be something to just use and not pay. So is the problem big in terms of market size, right? So we look at, so for example, as an investor, we usually a ballpark we say is it a $1 billion market, right? So is the share of the wallet, whether it's a business consumer or a normal consumer, is it $1 billion? That means that the company is worth investing in. Is the problem underserved, right? So again, here you want to look at problems where not a lot of players are there. So there's a lot of room to be in this space. Are you the right team, right? You have to look at your own skills as well. You have to look at your own strengths and weaknesses. If you're a team, then you have to look at each other's individual strengths and weaknesses and see that, whether if you combine them, will you be able to achieve, if you work on the idea, will you be able to achieve what you want? Is it easy to reach out to the target market, right? So you might be building something and eventually after 2 years, you see that it's very hard to reach out to the customers because they're not easily accessible, right? So let's say if you're trying to build something for the ultra rich people, unless you have that kind of network to reach out to them, it will be very difficult for you to do so. In this case, you have to think of, how can I reach out to people? So for example, a lot of people, they start with, a YouTube channel or a blog where they create the distribution first. They reach out to a lot of people. They have a lot of following from users. And then eventually when they launch the product, they know that there are some people who are willing to probably buy. Is your solution different from others? How are you differentiating your offering with your competitors? Because if it's the same, then people will be using your competitor products and you will not be able to kind of get any advantage. So you have to think of how you are different from others. Is the timing right? So you have to think of am I in the right time, in the right place? Because there are a lot of companies which came in early, like for example the Palm Pilot came before the iPhone, but that time there were no users because the price was expensive, the technology was not there, and people were also not kind of used to using touch screens that time. So that time, so they failed. But then companies like Apple, they succeeded because that time the technology was there and the price was not expensive, and that's why also BlackBerry were not able to compete with them because BlackBerry phones were very expensive and the iPhone prices were good enough for a section of the population who were interested in the product, right? So timing is important. You have to look at things like technology. You have to look at cultural shifts. So for example, again, I go back to TikTok. If it started probably 10 years back, no one would have used it, but now because of the cultural aspect, people are used to short form video. Finally, can you test the market quickly? So you do not want to build something where it will take you 2 or 3 years to just come up with an MVP, because it might work out, but if it does not, you would have wasted 3 years of your time. trying to build something which eventually either cannot be built or maybe customers don't need the product, right? So you want to do something where you can just show it to the customer, get feedback, and improve on it on a daily basis. Finally, you've evaluated your idea. Now you want to see whether this is something you want to go forward with, because doing a startup is a long journey. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. So you'll be spending a lot of time, years in doing this, right? So it's something which you cannot escape once you start doing. So here I use this model to help me to see whether I want to go forward with this idea or not. And this is basically on coming from the concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese concept, right? It says it basically is not for building a startup. It's basically for what you want to do in life. So here you look at things like what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. Sometimes you have to see, what are these. You don't need to have all the four things. I usually look for all the four things. What I would want to do, something which I love to do, something which I'm good at, something where I can make some money out of it, right? And something which can help the world, right? But it is not necessary that you need to have all these four criteria. Maybe you can do something where something which you love doing and you can make money out of it, right? And you can see how you can turn that into a business. So now once you have gone through these steps, you want to go forward with an idea. So the next best thing to do is use something called a lean canvas. So the lean canvas is based on the business model canvas, but the difference between a lean canvas and a business model canvas is that lean canvas is very applicable for startups, right? Whereas a business model canvas is used by big corporations, who have a lot of customers, a lot of partners. But here you're trying to figure out your next move, right? So here the lean canvas is basically divided into these 9 sections, where you start first with your customer segment. Who is your target customer? Who do you think would be willing to invest in your idea, right? And then you're looking at the problem. So what is the problem you think your idea can solve, right? And then once you know what the problem is, you try to find out the value proposition, right? So we talked earlier about value proposition. Like, for example, can your idea help save money? Can your idea help make money? Can your idea help build relationships? And then once you have the unique value proposition, you want to look at what solution you could make, which could be the best solution to solve the problem. Right? So once you have the solution, you can look at things like, how you can create unfair advantage. So again, I said, how are you differentiated from your competitors, right? So that, they cannot copy you. Then you have channels. So basically, how will you reach out to the users? Will you use social media? Will you use some kind of email marketing? Will you use blogs, video content, right? So these are basically your channels. Then you want to look at key metrics. How are you going to measure your success? It could be sales, it could be users. Again, depends on the kind of business and the kind of product you're selling, right? It could also be retention, how many users are staying onto the app. So based on what kind of business you have, your key metrics will vary. And then you have your revenue streams and your cost structure. So revenue streams is basically, how you'll make money. Are you going to offer one product? Are you going to do some kind of upselling where you're selling one product and then you are selling more services, right? Or are you going to sell multiple products, and how much are you going to sell them for? So that you get an idea of the revenue streams that your business will make. And then on the left, you have your cost structure. This is basically what kind of costs you need to incur. Do you need to hire a lot of people? Do you need to invest in technology? Do you need to build hardware for this? Where will you get all these knowledge, right? What kind of partners you need? You have to pay them. So these are the kind of things you have to look at. And once you put all of these things in this canvas, you can not only use it to talk to your customers, but you can use it to talk to your team members, so that everybody has a clear understanding of what you're building, for whom, what is the value proposition, what kind of revenue it can generate. So finally, once you know what the problem is, you have a solution to the problem, you would want to do customer interviews, right? You want to go to the users, you want to talk to them, you want to see if your idea makes sense to them or not, right? But you do not want to go to them and say that, this is my idea, this is my product, will you use it? Because that's the wrong way of talking to the user or the customer. What you want to do is you want to find out what the problem the customer has. You want to talk about the problem, right? So what is that problem they face, right? How big is that problem? How have they tried to solve that problem? Have they used any product to solve the problem, or are they looking for products to solve the problem, right? How much time have they spent on solving that problem? And then eventually, like, is it something which is, where they would be willing to pay for it? Or are they paying for such, solving this kind of problem? So once you get these questions answered, then you know a lot about, who your customer segment is, what kind of market size the product could possibly target, what is the exact problem, what could be the right solution to the problem, what kind of value it brings to the customer. Finally, I'm going to share you some of the resources. So basically, number one is, this is my own idea generator. You can just log in and use it and generate as many ideas as you want. Second is, you could read posts on Y Combinator blog. They have a lot of good content about how to build startups. You can actually sign up in their startup school program. So these are all free resources. Once you sign up in the startup school program, you can talk to other entrepreneurs, share ideas, and build together. Number 4 is a book. This is something I read recently, and it's a very good book. It's basically Why Startups Fail. So this book was written by Tom Eisenman. So Tom Eisenman is a head of startup incubation at Harvard Business School, and he has kind of collated all the reasons why startups fail, and he has categorized them into these very interesting categories. And this is a good book. You could look at if you have time. So thank you. Any questions? Would love to answer them.
The first is, how can I get funds to start my startup? And the second one is, can you give some examples of businesses that didn't need a big budget and didn't need a lot of capital when they were starting?
So the problem is that now it is very difficult to get funding at the ideation stage unless you have a lot of, I would say, pedigree. So pedigree could be, you either have very good degree from a very reputed college, or maybe you have worked in that industry for a long time and you know the problem, you know the solution. These are the two ways you can get money for an idea stage startup. But other than that, it will be quite difficult. So unless you have an MVP or a product which is being used by some people, right? It will be quite difficult to get funding. Second is businesses where not a lot of money was required, right? So here I'll give you a very interesting case here is, if you look at all these content-based startups which are successful today, if you look at like companies like BuzzFeed or let's say any content kind of companies, to create content, you don't need a lot of money, but you do need a lot of time. So I advise a lot of young people who want to start their startup journey but don't know how to. I would say, start your own channel. It could be a YouTube channel, it could be your blog, it could be anything on Facebook group, right? But the idea is to keep posting content, because as you keep posting content, there's a compound effect in place. What will happen after 2 years or maybe 3 years is that you will gain a huge following, right? You'll get if you're building a blog, you'll get a lot of traffic. Now, this traffic will come to you for free. Usually when startups start, they don't think like that. They think of building the product. They struggle for 2-3 years. And then eventually they find out that, this is a product which I cannot reach out to people. I don't know how to reach out to people. They're not using it because they don't know me at all, right? So you can go the other way around. You can, instead of, building product first, you can do distribution first. Build a blog, and then eventually, basically when you're doing a blog, or you can actually know who are these people who are, viewing your content, right? And then you have an idea of who these people are. So you can actually design a product for them, and then eventually you can sell to them.
What are the key challenges for a startup in the initial years? That's the first to the third year.
So there are lots of challenges. Building a co-founding team is a huge challenge, because it's not easy to find the right kind of people who has the right skills, who has the right mentality. So this is a personal problem of mine also. It's hard to find people who have the same kind of thinking as you, who are ready to spend a few years without making money, who is interested in the idea, in the vision, right? Who is also good at maybe a skill like coding, for example, right? So it's initially very difficult to build a team, but once you build a team, I think it's difficult to build something which has a product market fit. So if you look at statistics, you will see that most companies fail is because of, so number one is not getting product market fit. So basically they build something, take it to the market, people don't want it, and then the number two problem is they run out of money, because people don't use the product, they don't buy the product, and eventually they are not able to raise money for the product through venture capital. So eventually, the business shuts down, runs out of money. And then the third, what happens is when the business is in trouble, that is when the conflict starts happening. You fight with your employees, with your colleagues. So because, everybody is struggling, thinking about the next move. And so I would say these are the 3-4 reasons, why where people struggle.
The next question is, how do we know that the idea we have is good or sustainable for the long term?
Long term is a very difficult question to answer, because again you have to look at the value proposition. What is the value you're bringing to the customer, right? If you can help them, let's say, make money, right, that's a great value proposition. So if you look at a company like Meesho, for example, so Meesho, when they started, there was no any other company using social selling as a distribution channel, right? So what Meesho did is, they are not only helping the brands sell, but they are bringing in a lot of people who were looking for jobs, right? Who were looking for even maybe side jobs, right? And saying that, if you use Meesho, if you use your social network, help sell our products, you can make some money on the side, right? And a lot of people are doing it full time. So now this is a very good, interesting model. Sustainable or not, we have to see, right? But definitely as a business model, it works. But then maybe what could happen is, as I said, a timing is a huge thing, right? Maybe eventually people would not want, basically they would not want their friends always selling to them, right? It could happen that Meesho, so now what Meesho is doing is they're also trying to use the similar to an Amazon or a Flipkart model, where they have a marketplace and then you can buy from the marketplace, because they are probably also seeing challenges that when people are trying to sell products to their friends, it could come off as spammy, and people don't want to get interrupted all the time, right? So eventually they're also thinking of how to change it. So long-term sustainability is a question mark, but again, you have to change with the times and see, how you can do that.
What kind of experience do we need to start any kind of business from scratch?
So you have two kinds of entrepreneurs. You have entrepreneurs with a lot of experience, pedigree, right? And these are entrepreneurs who are starting something which requires a lot of intellectual capital, right? So for example, if you're starting a company in health tech, or let's say deep technology, right? Maybe something like some microchips or something like that, right? Where you need a lot of knowledge and expertise there. So here your knowledge would come in very handy. You would probably have that network of partners or people who you can collaborate with and build this thing, right? But then let's look at an app like Facebook. So when Mark Zuckerberg started, he had no experience. He is again studying in college, right? But he built something which did not exist before, right? A social network where you can connect, chat with people, connect with your friends. Although it did exist before in the form of, there were some other players, I'm not able to remember the name right now, but that market was not there. They had maybe a user base of maybe a few million users. But when Mark launched Facebook only for the college campuses, then he saw a great traction. All the students were using it. And that is what gave them an insight. So when I say insight, that is a very interesting point, is you do not need experience, but you need that insight. Because based on that insight, then you can, get everyone into your team, right? You can get investors, you can get other co-founders, employees, based on that insight.
How to find the co-founder for my startup idea?
That is a huge challenge. I have an experience of 18 years and I find it as a challenge today, finding the right co-founder, because there are so many things. So finding the right co-founder is like finding the right life partner, right? Because you need to not only be able to work with them all the time, you need to like them, right? You need to be able to, have fun with them. At the same time, you also need them to help you build the business. You need a person who has different skills than yours. So if you're good in tech, you need someone who's good in sales or in marketing, right? You need someone who believes, who is willing to, go along with the journey with you for the next 5 or 10 years as required, right? So these are the different characteristics of a co-founder. So it is difficult to find someone who has all these. But if you are able to find someone, then you should start not even just starting the business with that person, but you want to maybe start with small projects. Maybe you want to just discuss ideas, right? And then maybe you want to build a small app together. This way you'll also know that how you can work together, whether you like each other, right? And you can build bigger projects or not. And then eventually you can think of how to form the co-founding team with that person and then build the bigger version of the idea.
Someone asked, if we have a startup idea already, what would you say is the first step to actually implement it?
See, if you have a startup idea, I think you need to start gaining insights. And the best way to do that is to talk to your users. It could be users, it could be customers. But you want to know that, I think I showed in the, one of the slides here. So basically you want to ask them, what, you don't want to talk about your idea, but you want to talk about their problem. So what kind of problem do they have? Is it a big problem or not? Is it something which is really concerning for them? Have they spent a lot of time trying to solve the problem? Have they spent a lot of money trying to solve the problem? So this will give you an idea about, what you are doing. Does it fit with their problem, right? And then that will give you an idea about everything like this, the market size and solution. So once you know what they're looking for, then maybe you can start building you can start with maybe one feature. If you're building, let's say, an app or something, and then you can try to sell that to that user. Maybe first give it to them to use it and then see if they'll be willing to pay for it or not, right? And then once it works out, then you can scale further. You can maybe come up with more features, talk to more customers. But it's an iterative process. It's not where you build in isolation and then eventually you go to the customer and say, here is my product. Because that is where most startups fail. That is how most startups fail, not talking to the users.
So you mentioned that financial capital is difficult in the ideation stage. Intellectual capital is something that, people can have access to. So what is a type of capital that you think they can have access to very easily when you don't have a lot of experience or when you're just beginning your journey?
You should use whatever you have in your hand. So for example, let's say if you're studying in school or if you're in college, so what you have access to is your circle of other students studying in the colleges. So maybe, you can think of how to create a product for them. So I'll give you an example. So one of the startups we funded who came to us at that time, he was 13 years old, right? And basically he was building short form educational content. And he had a big network of people, not only in India, but from, other countries. And they were all, his users, right? Not customers, but his users who were seeing the videos. And then he managed to also talk to a lot of teachers in different parts of the world and managed to get them on their platform. And these teachers were not looking for money. They were looking for a platform where they could share their knowledge with, other people. So this worked out really well. So he, as I said, he's a 13-year-old, doesn't have money, doesn't have anything, right? So not a lot of knowledge probably, but he was able to build it, right? I'll give you another example of another founder, again, 13-year-old who I met last year. He started with a blog, right, where he was writing book reviews, right? And people were coming and reading these book reviews. So then he thought that why not sell books and get people to buy books? So people then started buying books and he was starting to make some money. I think the first thing is starting out, where even myself, where the challenge is that we are always stuck in the ideation part where we're not willing to spend time or effort by starting out, whether it's doing a blog or talking to 10 people, maybe learning to code, build an app, right? So you have to start somewhere, and eventually it's like it will pick up. Once you talk to other people, you try to build your network, things will pick up.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And Partha, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to help the students and the parents in the CH Tribe community. Stay tuned for more amazing sessions like this. We have them almost every Sunday. Wish you all a happy Sunday, everyone. Goodbye.